I have a thesis, I believe original to me. If you study astrology seriously, as the ancients did and some of us moderns do, you will learn that the visible planets signify things. The sun signifies the ruler of a nation, fatherhood, the yang polarity in Taoism. The moon signifies the queen, motherhood, the gathering of crowds, and the yin polarity. My thesis: when a new planet or heavenly body is discovered, its significations both announce themselves and then try to take over the world. This is the first of what should be a 6-part series, which bypasses Galileo discovering moons orbiting Jupiter and begins later in history with the 8th planet in our solar system. Part of what follows is my best understanding of the work of Robert Schmidt of Project Hindsight. Schmidt saw the discovery of the planet Uranus coincided almost exactly with the publication of the Critique of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant. If I were to choose 5 of the greatest philosophers in Western history, my list would include Plato, Aristotle, Descartes, Kant, and I don't know who should be number 5. Kant's critique is a signal event in philosophy and human thought. Rigorously, he took being and reason to and beyond any previous limits or boundaries. The Critique of Pure Reason left succeeding philosophers dumbfounded and unable to advance for maybe a decade after its publication. The discovery of a new planet signals something new in natural history. Since human beings could look up into the stars, we have only had the sun, moon, and 5 planets. The Critique of Pure Reason transcended philosophy, and Uranus transcended cosmology, with equally disruptive results. You will have to dive into the delights of Schmidt's own intellectual construction to get the full story. But in essence, Uranus transcends the sun. What does it mean to transcend the sun? How do you go beyond what the sun means? Mr. Schmidt employed Plato's axiomatic concept of same other to arrange the 7 classical planets along that spectrum. If the moon stands in for the other, the sun stands in for the same. If Uranus transcends the sun, how do you transcend sameness? How do you transcend identity? With the common. With the common, we have no tension, no dynamism. Life has no variety, and time goes slack. But if the dynamism is gone, then why is Uranus associated in astrology, quite rightly, with sudden and unexpected disruption? The Critique of Pure Reason was published in 1781 during what we call the Age of Enlightenment. In 1776, a brand new nation in one of its defining documents included this most Uranian sentiment: all men are created equal. Sounds great, doesn't it? But wait. Uranus has in our world an equally powerful downside. All people can be treated like interchangeable parts. Both of these Uranian sentiments go against what we think of as the natural order. That's disruptive. Take the statement, all men are created equal. Are all men equal in height? Are all men equal in weight? Is their strength the same? Is their skin color the same? Are men the same as women? Are their sexual preferences the same? Are their gender identifications the same? Is their intelligence the same? Is their inherited wealth the same? Does everybody speak the same language? What we call the natural order will ask all of these questions, and if we tally up the results, we will have a whole bunch of no answers. We understand that all men are created equal doesn't exactly mean any of those questions. We understand equality to mean that, while all people are different, every person has the same essential worth and should be treated as such in the eyes of the law. With all the variety in human beings, treating everybody equally is a fiendishly difficult ethical, political, and practical problem. If you ask anyone, if human beings should be treated like interchangeable parts, they will say no. Yet, in practice, people are plugged in or thrown away like interchangeable parts all the time. People hired to make McDonald's hamburgers are interchangeable parts, and the customers who buy them are too. Why, you could go to the drive-in window and request a quarter pounder with beef patties grilled rare with Dijon mustard instead of ketchup. Entrepreneurs like Robert Kiyosaki of Rich Dad Poor Dad fame, whom I admire, write glowingly about the precisely engineered procedures that empower McDonald's to make each Big Mac the same. No matter what time of day, no matter where in the world, no matter how intelligent or slightly below average the employees. The Industrial Revolution also came about roughly the same time as the discovery of Uranus. The first generation of peoples to work with the engines of mass production did not like the work at all. For mass production to be mass production, the machinery of that production needs to be producing product constantly. Why should I show up to work at the factory at the same damn time every damn day? The members of an agrarian society understood that when crops needed planting, you had to plant them when the season was right. When the crops needed harvesting, everyone needed to pitch in until the harvest was in. Granted, by around 1950, what we call labor-saving devices cut down very drastically on the amount of sheer work needed done now. But once the harvest was tended to and the chores done, your time belonged to you in a way that anyone working in a factory or in an office or in a retail establishment today, pre- and post-COVID-19, would find unbelievable. The natural order shows us that sunrise is not the same as sunset. Noon is not the same as midnight. You don't plant seeds in October and expect to harvest crops in January. But to a machine, day or night, rain or shine, every moment is the same. What made the industrial age work was child labor. Machines in factories needed tending to. They could not and still cannot tend to themselves. It wasn't the difficulty of factory work that made agrarian man walk off the job in those early days. It was the demand of industry that you alter your time to it. Children, being more malleable, were more willing to adapt to the highly regular hours demanded by the factory. We are all descended from those first child laborers. Because of them and the factories that employed them, we today think of 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day of work as being normal. No, as being natural. Something else has happened to time, which we also now think of as normal, which is another double-edged gift of Uranus. If every day, every hour, and every minute of the day is essentially the same as any other, it doesn't, by that standard, matter when you wake up, when you work, when you play, or when you eat or sleep. This leads to a life lived in shifts. We have overwhelming evidence that life lived according to natural rhythms promotes longevity, health, and well-being, but the Uranian impulse to uniformity denies that. If we had all human lives lived in multiple shifts, that would be awful enough. But that is not the only way Uranus warps our experience of time. If every hour is treated like any other hour, then why shouldn't any chunk of time be just like any other chunk of time, regardless of duration? Why shouldn't any hour be just like any minute? The duration should be treated then like an accident that has no importance. Every piece of time, then, is the same. Whether you have an hour or a minute, those spans of time are simply a chunk taken out of a continuum for getting something done. The Industrial Revolution treats time just like that. How many books could Gutenberg print in a day compared to Random House? How many books can Random House sell compared to downloads from Kindle or readership access to any blog? How much sheer typed verbiage gets generated every day, just in the comment sections of YouTube videos or on Facebook or especially Twitter? How many mouths could Auguste Escoffier feed in a day compared to any McDonald's? In the time it takes for a carriage maker to make a horse-drawn carriage in 1600, Toyota could make hundreds, maybe thousands, of automobiles. When you have life lived in shifts and spans of time are treated as interchangeable, you experience time being compressed. The generation of humanity that grew up during the time Uranus was discovered is unique. Every generation is unique, sure, but let's stick to the subject. Prior to 1781, the life you lived was the same as the life your father lived, which was the same as the life his father lived. A war, a famine, or a pestilence could change that life permanently, but when the suffering ended, you expected to return to the life you led before you suffered. Around the discovery of Uranus for the first time in history, the life you lead became fundamentally different from the life your parents led. Just about every plot of a Jane Austen novel turns on this fact, that the lives her heroines led were, in some crucial way, a radical departure from their family past. One of those crucial ways being whether it was right and proper that women could or could not inherit. For the first time in Western history, whether women could inherit was in the air, enough that a young woman could write about it in a fiction story for general consumption. And for the first time ever, the life you led was no longer the life your parents led. It was different. And this change affected that entire generation and all the generations since. Those changes have accelerated. Nobody can completely deny that, and the acceleration has yet to stop. Can we see that the discovery of Uranus also followed along a shift in the status quo? British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher was quoted as saying, "England was born of history, America born of philosophy." Well, philosophy has existed in Western culture since Anaximander, but it had never been the leading human concern until Uranus was discovered. From Copernicus in 1543, or maybe Descartes in 1641, until a remarkably brief period of time afterward, the status quo shifted from the dynastic terms of history to the universally conscious terms of philosophy. That shift matured and came to a head in 1781. But the status quo also shifted from the diversity of nature to the uniformity of industry. For the first time, the terms of human status quo were man-made.